Thank you very much, Donnie, for this time with us, with Conexión Austral. Your trajectory, your profile for us is very inspiring. And well, we have some questions that would like to post, well, in some way to create the surrounding for sharing your perspective about leadership.
Well, it's a
So
pleasure to be here with you all.
Thank you so much. So the first thing is that we wanted to ask you is, how would you explain the concept of post-growth to a leader who is still operating under the classic path of continuous growth without limits and all the impact it has?
It's a great question. The easiest way to explain it is to do an experiment. So you'll need a piece of paper and a pen, and we're going to do a drawing experiment. And I would explain this the same way to anybody. So if people are watching this, then they can participate in this experiment themselves. So if you grab a piece of paper and a pen and let me know when you've got those. And if you don't have those, it's okay. We can use our finger.
Okay.
But, so Fer has one and Marita. Great.
Okay.
And you're going to begin by drawing a line down the center of your page vertically. And in the top right, write the word future or futuro. And in the top left, presente. And we're going to start on the right-hand side. I want you to imagine a future that's working for everyone and everything, human and non-human species alike. An economy that's working for everyone and everything. Just imagine that for a moment. And when you've connected with some kind of image, drop down into your body and feel it. How does it feel in that economy that's working for everyone and everything? And when you're connected to a feeling with your eyes open, draw a symbol or a shape without lifting your pen that represents how it feels in that economy. And now we move to the left-hand side. How does the present economy feel? And again, when you've connected with the feeling, with your eyes open, draw a symbol or a shape without lifting your pen that represents how the present economy feels. So I've been doing this experiment for 13 years all around the world with people from every different walk of life, from Fortune 500 executives, even some billionaires, through to people living on the street, anarchists of all persuasions, people who believe that the present is better than ever, and others who think that it's worse than ever. And it doesn't matter who I do this with, where, or in what language. I've done this out in languages other than English. People consistently draw one of 5 symbols or shapes for the future and one of 5 symbols or shapes for the present, or a close variation or combination of those. So I'm going to show you what people around the world draw, and then we'll see what you drew. And if you're listening to this or watching this, you can compare what you drew as well. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen and show you here what people draw. So for the future, people typically draw a circle, an infinity or panarchy symbol, a spiral, some kind of nodular blob, or a heart. What did you both draw? Let's see.
Circle.
You
Like
did the
a sun,
circle.
like a sun.
Okay. And Marita, yours was like the nodular blob with a circle in the middle, I think, from what I could see, like a flower petal, yeah?
First I thought in a heart, but despite that, I draw a flower.
Okay, you thought the heart first and do the flower. Okay. And then for the present, people typically draw a jagged line, an isosceles triangle, a downward arrow, a rectangle, or a mess of lines. So Fer, what did you draw?
Arrow.
The arrow.
Arrow.
The
Arrow.
arrow. Okay. Yeah. And Marita, I think you drew something more circular, actually, which is
It
interesting.
represents a stone, a
A
heavy stone.
stone. Okay, a heavy
I
stone.
feel like
Okay.
something.
Interesting. So even yours also has the directional, right? The pushing down. Yes.
Yeah.
So what we typically say from this, and it's a little different to what you drew, Marita, because you drew something non-linear for the present, but what we typically see is more what Fer did, in the sense of we have non-linear for the future and linear for the present. And you asked me, and even your sensation, Marita, is there's some kind of linearity in that experience. And so when people ask, you asked, how would you describe someone to someone post-growth? I would say it's moving from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of whatever you drew. And in most cases, people are connecting to that understanding that all living systems thrive when you have circulation built in of the central resources, whether that's an ecosystem and the centrality or the circulation, needs to be of carbon, of nitrogen, etc., or our bodies and blood and oxygen, and these things have to circulate. And if they don't, we know that we get problems. And our economy is a living system, and its central ingredients are money and power. And so these things need to circulate. And when they don't, we get similar kinds of problematics. And we fundamentally all know that there's some things in our economy presently where things don't naturally circulate, where money doesn't inherently circulate, where power doesn't inherently circulate. And so post-growth is about moving to systems where that circulation is built into the design of the economy itself.
Thank you so much, Donnie. Now, it's time for the second question is, what's global shift make it urgent to revisit the actual type of economy and the way, the organizational paradigm that is more predominant now?
I sense that we all feel it, whether or not we are in a position to name the situation globally and in individual lives, and that is that there's increasing pressures, right? Marita, you sensed that the present has this downward, this rock that's pushing on the head. And the thing that is not well known, because, for example, things like climate change and limits in terms of ecological limits is more well known than what I'm about to describe. What's less well known, especially because you have theories of all tide, a rising tide lifting all boats, or this idea that if we grow the economy, things get better for everybody overall. What's less well known is that in any capitalist system, which our overall formal market economy is a capitalist economy, the total amount of debt always expands. Now, most people will focus, when they're talking about growth, on what's going up in terms of incomes, in terms of overall wealth, these sorts of things. And yet what they will miss from that equation, and you won't see them putting up the graph next to this or overlaying on the top, is what's happening with debt. So it's no surprise if we can accept for a moment, even if it's not something you believe fully, if we just accepted the idea that debt always expands in a capitalist system. That explains, especially because that debt is pushed to certain individuals in certain bodies from certain countries, in certain jobs, outside of formal employment, etc. If we can accept this, then it explains why, despite people telling us the world's getting better, we're experiencing it collectively as getting harder. The idea of the cost of living, that framing of what it costs to live, rather than just the idea of life being something that is naturally granted to us through the very being here in this world. The cost of living is a very real thing for many people. It takes a whole lot more effort to survive in an economy where debt is increasing, because it means that that has an effect on prices. It means that it has an effect on the amount of work one needs to do. It means it has the effect on the levels of stress when you're in that indebted situation. And what's really concerning is that for many people now, that indebtedness is, or at least feels, permanent, right? There's not a collective sense that, oh, this is a temporary phase. No, it's built in. And that's the case in many countries, especially in the global south, where the country just says, okay, this indebtedness is a part of our existence, and it hampers the ability to support all sorts of public services, for the ability to advance certain kind of progressive agendas, etc., right? Like that lived experience, that to me, Marita, is what is critical in this moment to understand, in addition to the ecological limits, of course, the climate related aspects, but to really bring this back to people's daily lives. If you're watching this and you're feeling it's getting harder, that's because it is getting harder.
In some way, it's kind of the need to center on the persons, on the people, and how the kind of the life experience. I mean, what
Right.
the people experience is as it is, and nobody
Right.
can change how it is experienced. So,
Right.
in some way, it's kind of it's an urgent need to recenter on the person's feelings of what is going on.
Right. Yes.
Some way, yeah. See.
Although, interestingly, you can try to do that, but unless you change the system, you're going to be pushing against the physics and the mathematics of this, right? So you can have political parties, you can have community groups, you can have individuals who try to center the people. I mean, that's what a lot of populism is in some senses. But the truth is that as long as you continue to be in a capitalist system where money accumulates and debt accumulates elsewhere, you're going to see the same dynamics play out. All you'll see is a difference between systems that are openly pushing this accumulation of money and the accumulation of debt, or others that are hiding that mechanism a little bit better. But they all take us in that same direction. And that's that crisis of imagination. It's very limited for many people to imagine a market system beyond capitalism. Yet that's actually where we have to go if we want to center people and their needs within the ecology of a greater need in terms of non-human species and this planet that sustains us.
Yeah, and also make me think about the feeling of the people that has no choice to change their own life. They don't have
Right.
the freedom to
Right.
choose, because they are in a system that does not let you come out. Say,
Right.
no, I want to stop and
Yes.
get out of the. It's not possible.
It's true. However, even with those who feel the most helpless in terms of being stuck in a system, there are actually some things that we can all do to change that system. But interestingly, they don't get talked about very often. I could speak to those now, or maybe hold them for later in the interview. What would you prefer?
Maybe it's the moment.
Okay.
No.
Okay. In studying this and being part of movements and organizations that are seeking to create systems change in very real ways in people's lives, what I have found is the most effective thing that any individual, almost any individual, because not everybody fits this, but almost any individual can do, is look at where you are banking. There is a big difference between banks, maybe not in terms of your experience of their services always, but in terms of who profits from that bank. Many banks around the world, public banks, credit unions, and others, the money goes back in to the system because there aren't any shareholders. But many banks, for people in Uruguay and in Argentina, many banks are also owned by some shareholders somewhere else in the world, which means that the money is getting taken out of Uruguay, Argentina, wherever those banks are, for example. This is an important one. Maybe you only have debts. Can you move your debts to another bank? Can you move your credit card debt, if you have credit cards, to another credit card company that is linked? For example, I have a credit union that I'm connected to, and so if my credit card, which I have credit cards with that credit union, was with a for-profit bank and I needed to pay interest on those debts, that interest would go to those shareholders partly. Moving it to a credit union changes that. So there are this important piece about our agency, and banking is a critical one for a whole lot of reasons, but I'll continue to also say where we purchase from matters. And you're right, not everybody has the luxury to think about where they purchase. Lots of people are surviving, so they're going, where's the discount? Where's the descuento? You know, like where can I find the way to reduce my costs? But even then, you might have options that from time to time, and that becomes important. Where you work as well. Not everybody has that freedom, but thinking about where you can steer your labor, and of course, where you put your energy and your support in terms of volunteering, if you have that capacity ever. These are important pieces where we do have agency. We can get behind certain campaigns, activities, these sorts of things. And at the end of the day, many of us, as a survival mechanism in these kinds of situations, can turn to each other through mutual aid to help our neighbors, to help each other, to take things out of the formal market economy, to lend things to each other, to share things with each other, to barter with each other, etc. And so often in some of the most struggling communities around the world and some of the wealthiest communities, and perhaps even in more so in the wealthiest communities, people don't know their neighbors. They don't know what they have to offer and what they need from each other. And so maybe that's too much for some people, but for others, that's a really important way of surviving these kinds of challenges when the continued pressure mounts. Who can we turn to get through this together?
This makes me recall when the pandemics, that it was very surprising to me that it was almost obvious that the people that were doing more for others and sharing more with others and giving more time were the less the people
Less
that have
wealthy.
less.
Yeah.
And so in some way the solidarity is kind of flourishes even when you're struggling, no? And so these small contributions that everyone can do sometimes make a huge change to a lot of people. And I understand, I mean, I have experienced this quite close during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much.
What kind of leadership become essential in a world that no longer means more but better? There are a new leadership, new ways of like leaders.
I feel that the kinds of leadership that are being called into these times are leadership where people know themselves as well as possible, where leaders are on a journey of awareness about what's driving them. Why? Because so often we see leadership that is driven by trauma. I need to be the best. I need to grow things as much as possible. I need to be in front always. I need to be in the spotlight. I need to be at the center. Why? Who knows? Whether it's childhood trauma, whether it's things you've experienced from previous workplaces. It's not so important. What's important is that with an awareness of these things, we have the capacity for leadership and leaders to see themselves through a different lens, to understand not just even servant leadership, this idea that you serve and you lead from underneath, but that actually there's new paradigms of leadership whereby that return to old paradigms of leadership in many ways, and paradigms of leadership that have been maintained by indigenous and rooted cultures around the world, which is dynamic leadership. In other words, there's a moment where, Fer, you are leading in this experience, another moment where Marita is leading, another moment where I am leading, and I might be technically the one who is listed as responsible for this group. Maybe I'm convening this group, we're working together, but I am not needing to center myself unless there are things that I need to share or do, etc. So in other words, real leadership for me in the 21st century is collective leadership, and it's dynamic. It understands that we all, especially with the right support from certain people and institutions, we can all step into leadership, but it doesn't have to be permanent, right? It can be temporary. You lead in this moment, then I lead. And here's the thing that gets missed. Often when we talk about leadership, there's the idea of leaders and followers. Yet in reality, most leadership that I see in organizations really refers to people making decisions and people talking and others listening. When you get in an organization to a space of realizing that talking is an immense privilege if you're in a group, and a leader acknowledges that and says, why am I talking now? Is it to feel good about myself, or is it because I have something to share? And then you realize that others, especially if you can create inclusive spaces where people get to choose if they want to share, they can reflect in silence, because that's an area that doesn't get thought about in leadership very often. Silent reflection, when you ask a question of a group, what do we all think about this idea? Let's take some silence. Everybody ready to share? Yes, I'm ready. And now let's hear from the group. And what you realize is that old idea of the sum being greater than the parts. In other words, when Marita and Fer both add in their thoughts, that we can create something that's better than anything I could have come up with myself. When you experience this, then you understand, in my experience, you understand what real leadership feels like. It feels fantastic. And it doesn't feel like you have to be at the center of the show. In fact, it feels like, why would I want to always be at the center of the show when I get this incredible outcome with us all collectively putting our ideas in? And where this leadership has to go, I'm sure of this in my body, is that it has to move to consent-based decision-making. What do I mean by that? And I'm referring here to systems like sociocracy. I mean that the old system in the Western capitalistic narrative of an individual being at the top making the final decisions is a system that is outdated. It's a way of maintaining power over others, and it doesn't liberate the creativity within spaces. People live in fear or feel totally excluded. You get false democracy in organizations. Oh, what do you all think about this? And everybody knows that it doesn't matter what we think. So-and-so is going to make the decision at the end of the day. This is not real. This isn't real agency. This isn't real inclusion. This isn't a real sense of ownership of our shared experience. So instead, the more we lean into systems where we can all say, give everybody the power to go, do I have a problem with this proposal? And if so, if I have a problem, we all get interested and say, ooh, what could we learn by this person sharing that they have a problem with this? Maybe we're missing something. And then they say, my problem is that there's a feriado on that day. There's a holiday on that day. Oh, thank God you shared that with us, because we were about to schedule our major event for a holiday. That would have been a disaster, right? Great. Now we move the proposal forward with that input. This kind of leadership, collective, dynamic, with individuals still helping to transition to that. You need strong individual leadership to transition to collective leadership systems. This, to me, is both what I imagine and what I have a felt experience of being some of the most empowering ways of being with each other and collectively experiencing how to navigate these challenging times.
Thank you so much, Donnie. In fact, I've experienced recently with both Fernanda and me are part of a collective that is called Fibras, threads in English, and we are in one of the groups. We are working with this framework of the sociocracy, and so I have started experience how different is the way of being when you work in this way and you kind of make open to the value of disagreement. Perfectly.
Right. The
Yes,
value
yes,
of
really.
objecting to something, the value of
Yeah, of
of
subjecting
seeing things
something.
differently. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not usual in the other forms of being, and I have just started to experience that, and I really, I can really say that it's amazing how you can kind of co-create initiatives, ideas, or whatever you are working in a
Yeah.
collaborative way, and taking
Let me
into account all the opinions.
in let me even take this forward for those listening to this or reading if there's a transcript, that in a very practical sense, which I'm so glad you're getting to experience it, Marita. Imagine that I make a proposal here for what we're going to discuss next in this conversation.
Mhm.
And then one of you said, I have an objection to that. Imagine now that I, as the original proposer, don't get to take the proposal forward, but let's say, Marita, you were saying, I have an objection. Now you get to propose something new that would work for you. Based on the original proposal, can you modify it in a way that works for you? This transfer of power, because usually, right, the typical experience that I have seen in organizations around the world is I propose something and then people discuss it and then they vote. It's very rigid, it's very static, right? And then people vote against it and now I feel bad. Instead, here, in the space of 1 second, I went from being the proposer to now I am listening and you are proposing because you said you couldn't live with my proposal. This transfer of power is so powerful.
Exactly. Exactly. This is how I feel it. It's incredibly amazing, the feeling that you get about this way of behaving. And the best thing that I see is that it is trainable. I mean, at the very beginning, you don't know. You are tempted to work in the old-fashioned way. And slowly you start to get trained to, oops, I have to listen. I can, and now I don't have to say nothing. I have to wait my turn to have a comment, a disagreement, or whatever. So this is it's really a good idea. Yes, and fortunately, it's coming more and more common, and I hope it will in some moment get a critical mass. No, this is maybe. I mean, I don't know what to think about that, but in some way,
Yo creo es
when it's
posible. I think it's
possible,
possible. I think it's possible.
yeah, it's possible that we have in any moment we will reach a critical mass of people behaving and thinking in this way to make a change.
The reason that I think it's possible, and I see it already moving in that direction, is because once you've experienced it, for most people, you can't go back. So when things have that inevitability that's grounded in like practical experience, it's a very strong thing. It feels better and it works better. You get better decision making. And if you're listening to this and you don't know about sociocracy, that would make total sense because it's not familiar for everybody. But often people, the response that I hear before people have experienced things is, oh, it's going to be slower. And at first it is, and it appears slower. But actually, given most inefficiencies within organizations comes from tensions and people doing things from spaces of passive aggression, of feeling that they're not seen or understood or supported in workplaces, right? And people then go and do things that create problems here, or they don't work at certain moments, etc. All of these tensions. When you involve people in decision making that might be slower itself, you get better outcomes that mean less inefficiency in terms of doing bad things in the wrong way, and then you go test those proposals, and you get happier workplaces, and happier workplaces are so much more efficient. You go slowly so that you have smooth relations with each other, and smooth relations with each other means you go faster together.
That's great. And I just was wondering if You know, the societies of wellness. I mean, there are very few countries in the world that are centered in the persons, in the human. I think that the general term is Sociedades del Bienestar, Society, Wellness Society. Is it that this type of working is more common in these kind of societies? Is part of the strategy, or
it's a good question. I'm not familiar with that framing. Would I say there's a correlation between use of sociocracy, for example, or consent-based decision-making in certain cultures? Not necessarily. Maybe in cultures where democracy is perhaps more rooted as a political system. I'm thinking here about the Indian Youth Parliament and their massive use of sociocracy. But the organization that we partner with, Sociocracy for All, is spread throughout. It, in fact, has a very strong Latin American contingency across many, many countries. So, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Latin America or South America is where sociocracy is probably going to boom the most. I wouldn't comment on why that is necessarily, but what I do think is that cultures where you still have some rootedness in indigenous practices, even if that has been pushed out, invisibilized, etc., what that does is it maintains a continuation of a connection to decision making where the process is to try to go into the body and feel the wisdom that's coming through. And in the indigenous cultures in North America and Australia that I've been exposed to, where I have my connections, people, and often women, would sit in circle and they would go into their bodies, and they would, whether they'd smoke a pipe or something else, they would feel into the moment and connect with Mother Earth. And they would say, one person would eventually speak into the silence, and then they'd collectively either agree or speak about it and make decisions, and then instruct the men to go and do whatever they decided. That idea of embodied reflection is, to me, the connection between well-being, Bienestar, and the decision-making. We're looking to be in our bodies when we're making decisions, rather than where most decisions in organizations are happening, which is from an intellectual headspace of conditioning. What's going to get us the best result here in terms of profit? What's going to get us the best result in terms of efficiency, etc.? And that cuts off from a whole lot of things that we feel underneath. And when we work in groups and let everybody have a chance to feel what they're feeling, chances are someone's going to feel something that others aren't feeling. And that's important, especially if we're going below the emotional state, reacting and giving space to support people to say, what does your gut say about this idea? Which, of course, in many, many businesses and many sort of modes or approaches to business, many people would say, that's a joke what you're laughing about, what you're talking about. The idea of making decisions from your gut, that's the worst thing you could do. Well, guess what? That's a classic patriarchal conditioning, because in particular, women, in many cases around the world, will often get gut experiences about what's happening with their child, the safety, etc. We know that the gut has wisdom in it that it's important to actually bring into organizations. This isn't some kind of out there idea. It's critical for organizations to actually be slowing down and making decisions from what their bodies are telling them, because our bodies are a complex, incredible ecosystems, right? Alive with all sorts of stored information from across the universe, given our cells are literally from across the universe, right? So it's these sorts of things that bring well-being and consent-based decision-making together for me, because you're coming back to the central aspect of our experience in terms of well-being, which is our own bodies. How am I feeling in this moment? How are others feeling in this moment? And then how are we feeling about a proposal, a decision, etc.?
So here, as I hear you, it's kind of the words that maybe the mindfulness, the listening to others, the empathy,
Yes.
are all words that come.
Mindfulness, empathy, yes, listening to others. The mindfulness, though, for me often focuses on the mind, and I'm suggesting even more full-bodied.
More, okay.
In fact, there's a little, and maybe this is a little off topic, but just briefly, there's a lot of experiences that I see with people who are working in organizations and with businesses that will come in and do coaching around mindfulness. And what I'll often see is that they will encourage people to, for example, try to clear your mind and be present with yourself, right? Clear your mind. But actually, what I'm suggesting here is to find ways to still the external activity, things that are happening in your world, and then actually notice all the activity in your body, not disregard it, not try to clear yourself of everything, but actually what's happening here. So if you're making a decision about a budget, so this week, for example, our organization came together and we collectively looked at all of the budget for the next year, all of the salaries for every individual. We prepared everybody to know there was going to be this experience of seeing everybody else's salaries. That might make you feel different things in your body. And if we then use mindfulness in a particular way of like, try to clear certain things out, we're missing what we want, which is, no, we want you to go still, take a moment, take a breath, look at the data, take another breath and notice, what are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling scared. Are we going to have enough cash if we don't get this income here? I'm feeling upset. Why? Because I looked at someone else's pay rate and I compared it with mine and I'm feeling insecure. These things are actually really, really important for organizations that want to build deeper trust, to actually have a space to support people to bring their full bodies to the workplace, not leave your body behind and just bring your brain.
Yeah, in fact, for me, mindfulness, in fact, is not being empty, but is the moment when you are aware of how is your mind. I mean, more than the need to make it shut down.
If we extend that to the body, then I think we're on the same page. How is the mind and how is the body? Both of those parts.
What's going on inside me when, because then it's giving information on this type of information that is not intellectual, but
exactly
lived experience of what is going on. So, but you mentioned South America,
yes,
in some moment, and so and you say that you kind of have an idea that South America has something to give, and so we in fact are wondering is what can Latin America, particularly as we are from Uruguay and Argentina, what can this part of the world contribute to this global transition that we have to go through for achieving models that are more conscious and more sustainable, more human-centered, more in balance with nature and regenerative and sustainable?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm going to start my answer with a little story. When I first moved to Argentina 4 years ago, I had come from a background of a field called asset-based community development, which essentially says start any experience with what's working before you go to the problems. And so when I encountered people here, my first response when they would ask me where I was and I had lived in the US for 8.5 years, and prior to that in Australia, where I'm from Australia. And I would say, I'm from these places, and they would say, oh, it's so fantastic there. And what I did for all of the first encounters that I had with people was, if they said things like that, or even if we were just talking, I would point out all the things that I appreciated about Argentina. Maybe it was the local tienda, like the way that people were selling things, as part of the residential areas, you had shop fronts in places. Maybe it was the way that the banks all supported with discounts local business in ways that I hadn't seen in other countries. Maybe it was the traffic light system and the way that it gives you the signal so you know how long you have to wait. Whatever it was. Maybe it's mate culture, right? Like these sorts of things. So whatever it is, I would reflect back things that I saw that were great. The initial response was, oh, but it's better in the US or Australia. And I would keep saying, yeah, but I really like this here. Something interesting happened. After a little while, all of those people started to take more pride in their country when they talked to me about things. The idolization of where I had come from changed because I was holding back a mirror that was not expected for them, right? That legacy of coloniality, of imperialism, of exporting certain places being better than others goes deep into the conditioning of how people in Latin America, from Latin America, relate to people not from Latin America. So when I did this and I saw this shift, it goes to your question, Marita. What can be done in terms of leadership? Everything. Why? Because here are the countries that have been indebted, enslaved, have histories of violence, of constant extraction, mineral extraction, etc., monetary extraction, labor extraction. And yet, here people still, in most cultures, center family, center each other, center community. Solidarity is stronger here than in many of the individualistic Western cultures. That's it. That's the answer. That's the path forward. What's missing is the reflective lens, especially from white Westerners, to be able to say, I see you. I see what you do here, how you survive, how you thrive, how you will still, how families will still make time for mate in the street, pull out the chairs in front of the small place, even if they're living in a villa and they're working 3 jobs, 4 jobs, and they have to run straight to the next job, they'll come home and make some time to share mate with their family. That concept is so foreign to certain cultures now, and that's where the leadership is here.
It's so strong, your message, and so also inspiring and giving faith for the possibility of a change, and so I'm grateful about that. And you, in fact, in this question, you answered the last one. That was, why are you here in Argentina? Why did you choose this country?
In the South. Why the South?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, a relationship brought me to Argentina, and then I was always interested in being as close to as many trees as possible. And so here is one of the places where I'm surrounded by trees, which is, I'm in a privileged situation, right? This is not a life that everybody can have, and so I'm very aware of that. But for me and the work that I do, it was important for my own well-being, to seek to be able to go out to the lake or the forests, and here I'm in a position where I can do that, which nourishes my soul and allows me to continue with the work that I do in this world.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your feelings, and the possibility kind of a path that can be shared with others to make our organizations and our families and our world at least a little bit better for everybody. So thank you so much. And well, whatever you want to say for finishing.
No, I'm just grateful for those of you for you too, of course, and for those who've listened on this short journey we've had together here over the last 40 minutes or so. And it's true, these are challenging times, and things may get harder. In fact, mathematically, as I said before, chances are that the weight will get heavier. And what do we do when weight gets heavier? The only thing we can do, which is hold it together more, right? Share the load with each other. So there's a tendency in many cultures in times of crises to go towards oneself and defend and protect. And one of the things I love about the cultures that surround me here is that solidarity. So I encourage people to think, where can you extend your solidarity in these times, no matter what your political beliefs? Because we are all in this together. We live on this little planet when you zoom out, and that thing that astronauts say when they see just how really we are on the same little marble together, this blue marble, that realization of our solidarity in terms of collective experience on the same planet, the more we can come back to that and extend how we support each other in these times, the more we'll be able to learn about how we transition to something that is truly sustainable and regenerative.
As a whole.
Thank you very much, Donnie. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure for us.
A
And
mí
thank you for
también.
your time.
Thank you both.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias,
Muchas
de verdad.
gracias.
All right, ciao.